Hello, I'm Emma Hartnell-Baker, creator of the Speech Sound Pics Approach, where we're shaping reading and spelling brains. We know so much now about brain plasticity and about the fact that we can actually modify brain networks. So we're shaping reading and spelling brains using specific early intervention strategies that are also appropriate for children who are already struggling. Now let's have a look at these pictures. You'll recognise the three at the top. I actually call them speech sound pics, because they're representations of the speech sounds of the smaller parts of our words. So for example, if I say the word cat, there are three smaller parts in that word: k, a, t. Now the children who can't hear this, they're the children who've got poor phonological awareness. They may not hear that the last sound is t, or the middle sound is a, or the first sound is k. Even if they hear k, at, they may not be able to blend them. These are all the skills we're focusing on to shape reading and spelling brains. If you're using letter names, I'd strongly advise you to stop unless you've got a child that's really flying and seems to have no problems at all, and the child who can definitely hear how many smaller parts there are in words, what they are, what's the last one, what's the first one, etc. If you've got any questions, just ask me about this. But I would strongly suggest that you don't teach letter names, because children don't need to know letter names to be able to read and spell. We actually use letter names to label letters, and I'm going to demonstrate this now. So let's imagine you're teaching a child that here is A, C and T. The same as, for example, the made-up letters at the bottom, our made-up alphabet. That could be pront, ma, c. So here we've only done the letter names. Let's see if that can help us to actually read and spell, so reading words or spelling words. Let's try and spell a word first of all. How would you spell the word cat? Remember, you only know the letter names. How would you know it's C-A-T? You can't know it's C-A-T until you've got a bit of information first. And let's think about this made-up language. How would you know how to spell the word fasorta using those three pictures? Fasorta. You know that the letter names are pront, ma, c. You wouldn't be able to unless I told you what those pictures represented. So let's think about our English alphabet. You know that is a picture of A, and a picture of K, and a picture of T. Then you can spell the word cat, even though if you don't know the letter names. Because you think, cat, what's the first sound I can hear? K. What's the next sound? A. What's the last sound? T. K, at, cat. Now which are the pictures to represent the K, A and T? There they are. So you would move them around. Now if you see in this picture here, I've actually put the numbers underneath, and this is because in the early years we're helping children to segment, which is to order, so really making sure we're knowing from left to right and thinking about where they go. It makes it really easy for early spelling because we just say the word, listen for the speech sounds, count how many there are, write that number of lines, and then find the right sound pics. We can do this all up the school. Think of the word throat, th-r-o-t. 4 speech sounds, so we need 4 sound pics. So when we're doing cat, I'll ask the children to hear for the sounds k, at, and think which one goes on the number 1 for the first one, which is on number 2, and which is on number 3. And this really helps children. K, at, cat. So let's think of our made-up language. We know the letter names are pront, ma, c. Now I'm going to tell you that representations here in order are saw, fa, ta. Saw, fa, ta. So if I asked you to spell the word fasorta, what would you do? You think, which is the representation for the fa? Which is the representation for the saw? And which is the picture for the ta? Fasorta. So you'd move them around, you'd manipulate them. And this is what we want children to be able to do. So this is what we're doing when we're reading. We want children to look at words and know the sound pics that are used to build that word. In these 4 words, we might be focusing on the speech sound k, and the fact that there are different ways to represent the speech sound k, and looking at those sound pics. We actually have a speech sound cloud for every speech sound in the English language. So what the children can do is they can actually listen for the speech sound, for example, k, look in the speech sound cloud, and they can see all of the representations. And again, this really helps children with spelling, especially the children who have struggled, who kind of think it's never ending or that they've got to learn words as a whole. They actually don't. All they need to be able to do is listen to the word, hear the smaller parts, and know how to represent them. So they do need to know all of the sound pics, and often they only know the first. So for example, they might think S is only represented by S. And this comes back to why we need labels. I have to say S so you know which is the representation I'm talking about. So if you have a look at these words that the children will decode as d-k, duck, k-at, cat, sock, soccer. Now this next word shows how actually, depending on our accent, we can actually have the sound pics in different places. So it could be kangaroo, kangaroo, k-at, aru, kangaroo, or k-a-ng, a-r-oo, in which case I needed to put the number 5 under the R and the number 6 under the oo. Anyway, kangaroo, what we're focusing on is the k sound. So the prep children might be highlighting on their piece of paper where the k sound is in the word. So again, we're really looking at those speech sounds and how they link to print, to the speech sound pic. So what about letter names? If I was to be asking them to write the k speech sound, I would have to be able to tell them that it's the K or the CC or the C or the CK. That's the label, because it's all the same speech sound. So this is when we do start to teach letter names for a reason, and that's because we want children to label. However, if I'm teaching pre-prep or prep, what I do with the speech sound pics banks is actually give them numbers. So I can say to them, for example, if they're asking dolphin, which is the sound pic for f, then I can say to them, go and find number 2, and they found the sound pic for number 2. This is because they also often need to be able to take it to their tables to be able to write it down. But when they're getting a little bit more confident, then instead of the sound pics on there, we actually give lists of words that might have that representation in them, just to keep solidifying in their brains the different sound pics. The approach is very, very visual, so we've got them all around, and what we do as well is we don't presume to know how every brain is the information it's taking in, so we give them as much information as we can and facilitate an environment where the children can take in what they can take in, but we are actually modifying brain networks. And we're doing this based on neuroscience and education research. What we're doing is identifying those children with poor phonemic awareness, because if you think about what I've just told you, if you can't hear those smaller parts in words, how are you going to know which sound pics are used to represent them? So those children would have to rely on sight words, and the children who have poor phonological awareness, who are struggling, I would absolutely bin the sight words, other than using them a few high frequency tricky words, and I discuss that in training, because the brain can't retain that many whole words. So what we need to do, instead of trying to give that child more and more words to memorize, which they can't do, and then they struggle and they feel awful and whatever, and they might retain them for the spelling test the next day, but they're certainly not going to remember them in a few weeks. They're certainly not going to use them in context. What we need to do with those children is really help them develop phonological awareness, and this is where the shaping, reading and spelling brains part comes into this. So we're helping them to be able to hear the speech sounds in words, to know how to appropriately count them, and to know which sound pics are used to represent them. So that's what the Speech Sound Pics approach is about. It's about keeping it really simple for children based on what they know, which is speech. If they're having difficulties with speech, we help that, because we're really working on pronunciation and really helping them hear why we say words, so it's breaking them down. So this approach is a preventative approach, and it's the way that we can help boys outperform girls. It's a quick, surefire way to get all children reading by 6, but the main thing you need to do is to be able to understand how it works and understand the reading brain, the reading and spelling brain. So this is what our training is all about. Now, the kind of things I've just done there, which is just helping you really kind of understand our alphabetic code and what we need to be able to do and read and spell, these are the things we need you to understand. So I hope you found it useful. And do ask about school PD in your area. We also run parent workshops. So the main thing we need to focus on is children being able to hear the speech sounds, and we have a very early years approach. I'm an early years specialist. I love young children, and so we do things like we've got the speech sound family, the speech sound ow, only speaks in speech sounds. The children love it, and it really helps them to be able to understand our alphabetic code. It helps us to develop the phonemic awareness, and then the phonics is an awful lot easier for us to teach. Here are the speech sound clowns, and we use a lot of puppets so that we can, especially the puppets that have, you can actually manipulate their mouths, because that can again really help with the visual, for help children to actually see when the say for example the speech sound frog's mouth is moving with f, r, o, g, frog, etc. Anyway, this is a short clip of Oscar, who's in prep, just to show you that very early on they love the Speech Sound Pics approach, and you can see that this little boy, he's actually gone into the corner with a brown paper bag, written his own story, but what he's done to help with his writing and his spelling independently is he's said, for example, fat frog, fat, f, at. He's written 3 lines and he's worked out the sound pic to go on it, f, at. And the same for frog. So please do have a little watch of Oscar, who I'm very, very proud of. Oscar, come and show me what you've done. Did you do this all by yourself? Wow.
Fat frog.
Fat frog, so is it your own story?
No, it's for you. It's for the speech sound frog anyway.
Wow.
Fat frog. The fat frog is on the log. The fat frog jumps into the pond splash. Fat frog jumps away.
That is amazing. He's an author. He's written his own book. How old are you, Oscar?
5.5.
5.5. And look, he's written his own book. He's made a hill. What's he eaten? Well done. And Mitchell did it perfectly. He just did the missing sound, not the whole word. He did the it. So he can put the it there.
I did the missing sound.
Oh, sorry.
You did the H one.
Oh, then they were. Well done. So it's the it.
I didn't do it. That's an M.
You do it. Right, you ready?
And that's an M.
You ready? Look, we've swapped boards. Are you ready? Who's going to get it this time?
This is an M.
Who's going to get it? Oh, well, I'm going to trick you this time.
I don't know. Is it A?
No, thank you, son. Fish.
Oh, I don't have a pen.
Fish.
Pig.
Fish.
Pig. Oh,
Nicholas.
I did
Fish. Fat Frog by Oscar. Fat frog. The fat frog is on the log. The fat frog jumped into the pond. Splash! Fat frog jumps away. Created this fun approach because I know schools are very results driven. This will also allow boys to outperform girls. So this approach will help children learn to read and spell confidently really quickly. But to do this we have to have teachers teaching the alphabetic code systematically, directly and explicitly, as well as the self-discovery. So for example, we start off with the first group of speech sounds, s, at, it, n. Here you can see the first pictures that we're going to teach the children. Here is one of the pictures to represent the s speech sounds, a picture to represent the t, a picture to represent the p, a picture to represent the I, and a picture to represent the n. So these are the speech sound pics, and you can also see how the speech sound pics are used within these words, their first learning, and we build up. So these children are actually decoding readers within the first 3 weeks of prep, and we build up at such a rapid rate that these children are far exceeding their expected reading and spelling levels for their age. So please do contact us, and thank you for watching.